Today we're going to be sharing with you how to raise the dead. Also, I just want to remind you to like and share any of the videos that we're going to be posting, either in Spanish, Portuguese, or English, whatever languages you speak. You're more than welcome to jump on. We have something for everybody, okay? So, just looking at the topic of raising the dead, you have to first understand that it's even possible to raise the dead. In fact, if you don't believe in raising the dead or resurrection, then your faith doesn't count for a whole lot, because then it means you don't believe that Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. And we can see that in Romans 10, 9 and 10, that you have to believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. So you can see that this is something that is very important to how we walk in what we believe. Not only that, but if you go with me to John chapter 11, verse 25, you can see this is the mentality, this is the mindset we must have as believers, is the understanding of what Jesus said here. Jesus said to her, right? He's referring to Martha. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives, believes in me, shall never die. Do you believe this? Now let's just look at that first section of verse 25. It says, I am the resurrection and the life. So if you've been born again, then you have to have this understanding of the fact that he abides in you. Greater is he that is in me than he that's of the world. Right? So you have the one who is resurrection and life abiding in you. So when you go to raise the dead, it's not something that you have to work up and force out and strain and like repeat the same thing over and over or anything like that. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the one that you've been made one with. And that is Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 6:17, it says, he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with the Lord. So he's made us one with himself. He brought us into himself. So if that's the case, then you can see that when we go around dead people, they can't help but resurrect. They can't help but come back to life. Why? Because, again, we have the rivers of life flowing out of us. We've been brought back into connection with the source of life. That's God, through Jesus Christ, that allows us to give life freely to whomever we deem to. And honestly, we don't say, well, I picked that one, I don't want to pick that one, or anything like that. We should literally go out of the way. Anytime the devil has gone and killed somebody through sickness, through disease, or injustice, and we should raise them up. Okay? So if that's, your qualifier, that would be it. So it's very important that we begin to have this mindset that resurrection and life can't help but flow out of us. Okay? So let's go to Romans 6 very quickly. And I want to show you something here as well. Romans 6, and we will start in verse 2. We can start in verse 1. It says, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means. How can we who have died to sin still live in it? Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? We were buried therefore with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. We walk in newness of life. That alone right there should get you to the point, and you can continue reading. It's all here. It's all there. It's laid out. That as we walk in newness of life in Christ Jesus and what he's done, and the beautiful, just the beauty of what he did on the cross and his resurrection from the grave, and what all that entails, the dominion and the authority, and literally overcoming the devil and the systems of the world and the economy of the world. And so much, it's so important that we really begin to tap into this and understand that he abides and he lives in us. So when I go to pray for the sick or commend them, we see a little bit of everything, right? We see Paul where person fell out of the window, he went and laid on him and then got back up and said he was fine, and he woke up later. We also see, Jesus commanded Lazarus to come out, right? We also see where he took a child by the hand. She immediately came back to life. And the one thing, too, that you see is that they all say, oh, they were just sleeping. So even in their own mind, they see that they were just asleep. It wasn't like, it's final, they're darned or they're damned or anything like that. It was just simple as they're sleeping, I'm going to wake them up. And with that mentality, it changes everything. It's just a minor tweak in our own mentality. But that little tweak can mean all the difference. So let's say you get called to a scene to go raise somebody from the dead. And you don't have to go there and you don't have to scream, you don't have to shout, you don't have to do any of that. Just release the life, okay? And it's very easy, it's very simple. And has everybody I prayed for come back from the dead? No. And I can't explain that. I can't show you in scripture any of that. If it was their will or anything like that, there's no precedence for that. The only thing is that I'm growing. I'm growing into the full stature of Jesus Christ. And everybody that Jesus raised from the dead, he raised, he didn't have one failure. He raised them all from the dead that asked. So it's very important that we see through that lens and that perspective. Don't focus on the failure. If you focus on failure, you become the failure. But if you focus on life and the source of life, who is Jesus Christ, then life flows out of you, exudes out of you. Then you don't have to even pray for people. You can be walking through an area and they'll feel the heat, not because you're hot or sweaty or anything like that, but they'll feel the heat of the Spirit of God on you and literally start getting healed. How else do you think that by Peter's shadow? What's in his shadow? Right? Other than the sun, causing the shade from his body, there's nothing in the shadow, really, right? But his shadow healed people out in the street. And so that's just their perspective. That's just what they wrote about. What if it wasn't even that? What if it was just, I'm just speculating here, I'm just saying, what if it was just the presence of God that just surrounded him? And as he walked through the streets, it didn't matter if they laid on the left hand or the right hand, they were healed. Because of God's goodness, because we are the carriers of the Holy Spirit, right? Because we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So if we're the temple of the Holy Spirit, then he abides in us. He doesn't come and go, as we see in 1 John chapter 2. And so it's not, the unction comes and it goes and it's only with the stronger. And so it doesn't say that. You have the unction. The only thing is that sometimes we don't pay attention. So going back to what it says about the Word of God, it is very important that when we go to raise the dead, we don't hyper-focus on vain babblings of repeating the same thing over and over. If you don't say something in faith, it's not going to be done. Okay? You have to say it in faith. You have to say it in absolute trust. This is going to come to pass because the Word of God tells me so. And stand on that. You don't need to sit there and fight and beg and cry and wallow or anything like that. You stand as the Son of God and you declare the Word of God over them. You shall live and you shall not die. And don't make it a method. Well, I have to say it this way. I have to do that. Well, I didn't hold my head just right. No. Have faith in God. Going back to Mark 11, right? 22. Have trust in Him. If He tells you can raise the dead, you can raise the dead. Don't doubt in your heart. Anyone who doubts in their heart, they can't believe that they're going to get anything from God. So you have to understand, you have to completely trust in God. Throw yourself into Him. Say, God, here I am as your representative in this situation. Let's get this job done. As a co-laborer with you, as a co-heir of Christ, let's do this. And you'll see the miraculous. You'll see people raised from the dead. You'll see much more, besides healings and words of prophecy and words of knowledge. This is the key. This is the essence, is understanding and focusing and having trust, complete trust in God. And so real quick, I just want to squash the sacred cow. A lot of times we say, well, I have a little bit of faith, or I don't have enough faith. Understand the word there, as I've shared with you in a past video, pistis, Strong's G4102, literally means trust. So you're saying, I don't trust God. Then what difference is you from the world? Then find somebody who does trust God, and have them pray for you. But at some point, isn't it better to have your own trust in God, your own faith in God, so whenever you need something, you don't have to go track somebody down. You just go directly to the source. Or the source, right? Because the kingdom of God is in you. His abode's in you. If you're a believer, he lives, he abides in you. So it's very important that we begin to look at everything through this lens, this situation, to where we can move forward into the supernatural, into the miraculous. Very easy, because we don't differentiate and separate ourselves from God, because God has made himself one with us. And what God has joined together, let no man divide. So it's very important that we continue to look at this exactly the way God created it. And I guarantee you, as we begin to do this, you will begin to see more people raised from the dead. You'll begin to see incredible miracles and stuff out on the street. And all it is simply trusting. So when you go to raise the dead, trust that God put you there for that very situation. And all you have to do is go and release life. I'm going to share just one last story. I was listening to T.L. Osborne in his school on healing the sick. And he shares about his wife Daisy, that she was in India. And they gave her a stadium to speak at. And there at the stadium, she just happened to show up super early. God told her to show up super early. She did. A lady showed up with a dead baby. And she didn't do what most of us believe we would have to do, is snort and shout and throw slobber and spit and strain. So she just took the little baby in her arms. She walked around, she said maybe about 30 minutes or so. I can't remember exactly how much time. It wasn't much at all. And she just let the life of God flow out of her into this child. And the child came back alive. And it's that simple. It's that easy. We don't have to force rivers. They flow where they want, in an abundance. So just let the rivers of life flow out of you, impacting and changing all those around you. And so, again, this message, we have to understand that it's got to get a hold of us. As we read the Bible, we look over and we see the simple truth. We need to apply it to our lives. And as it gets a hold of us, we become the gospel. We truly are the gospel. Because everywhere we go, we can't help but bring the good news of Jesus Christ. And that we are no longer, looked at according to our sin, because that's been wiped away. But we can walk with God in fellowship and communion with him to destroy the works of the devil. And literally take dominion here on the earth. And that's not over each other. That's over, all the works of the devil. It's over the fish and over the ground and the animals and everything else. And you'll see, just trusting in God allows all that to happen. You can look back at every story in the Old Testament. As they trusted in God, that's when God showed up and showed himself strong on their behalf. So if you want to see the miraculous, you want to see the supernatural, you want to see the amazing things that God has for you, then be the gospel. And remember, like and share.